His hands were already bleeding, raw from the relentless, biting cold, when the whimper cut through the winter air. Arthur didn't think. He moved. Down the treacherous, ice-slick bank he scrambled, towards the churning black heart of the Blackwood River. A tiny puppy, nothing more than a shivering speck of fur, clung desperately to a jagged rock, seconds from being swept into the deadly rapids. From the warmth of her chauffeured Bentley on the cliff above, a woman watched in horrified silence, her diamonds glinting like the cruel ice below. She had no idea that the ragged, frostbitten man plunging into that frigid hell was about to trigger an offer so unbelievable it would change both their lives forever and leave even the hardest heart in tears. Arthur Jenkins knew cold. It was his constant, unwelcome companion, seeping through the holes in his worn boots, chilling the marrow in his bones. For 2 years, since life had relentlessly stripped everything away, his small hardware business, his beloved wife Martha, his home, the streets had been his unforgiving bed, and the indifferent sky his roof. Each morning, like this one, began with a painful assessment. How numb were his fingers? Could he still feel his toes? His current shelter, a collapsed section of an old, derelict boathouse near the imposing Sterling estate, offered little protection from the wind that howled like a hungry wolf. He'd learned to read the river, the sky, the subtle shift in the air, his survival depending on these small, bitter lessons. He remembered a time his hands had been warm, capable, petting his own dog, Max, long gone now, a ghost of happier days. High above, on the manicured grounds of that very Sterling estate, Genevieve Sterling felt a different kind of chill, one that no luxurious fur throw or perfectly climate-controlled Bentley could dispel. It was a chill of loneliness, an emptiness that echoed in the grand, silent rooms of her mansion. Her late husband, Arthur, a name that now felt like a cruel irony as she unknowingly watched another Arthur below, had been gone for 5 years. Her children were distant, living their own busy lives. Her days were a procession of board meetings, charity galas, and the careful management of a vast fortune, yet genuine connection felt as elusive as warmth on this frozen morning. Her terrier, Barnaby, her last real comfort, had passed the previous spring, leaving a silence that was almost unbearable. This morning drive along the river, a ritual started with her husband, was now a stark reminder of all she'd lost. The no trespassing sign on her property a grim symbol of her isolation. The sound was unmistakable, a puppy's desperate yelp, sharp with terror. Arthur, who had been trying to gather a few dry twigs, froze. His gaze snapped toward the river. He saw it instantly, a small, tawny creature tumbling down the icy bank on the Sterling side, then a splash as it hit the water. The current, swift and brutal here, snatched it, pulling it toward the rapids. Arthur's heart lurched. He was on his feet before a conscious thought could form. His own gnawing hunger, his aching joints, forgotten by some small miracle. The puppy's scrabbling paws found a temporary hold on a slick, dark rock midstream, a tiny, isolated figure against the raging water. Inside the Bentley, Genevieve also heard the cry. "Thomas, what on earth was that?" she asked, alarm sharpening her voice. Her chauffeur, Thomas, ever vigilant, pointed. "Madam, it appears to be a small dog there on that rock. It's in distress." Genevieve leaned forward, her gloved hand instinctively clutching her chest. The sight of the tiny, helpless creature, its faint whimpers carried on the wind, pierced through her carefully constructed composure. It looked so much like Barnaby in his youth. "Oh, the poor thing. We must do something. Call animal rescue." Even as she spoke, her eyes caught movement below, by the decrepit boathouse. The homeless man, the one her estate manager often complained about, the reason for prominent no trespassing signs. He was scrambling toward the river. A knot of apprehension tightened within her. Surely, he wouldn't be so foolish. Arthur didn't weigh the risks. He didn't consider the near certainty of hypothermia, the agony the freezing water would inflict on his already frost-ravaged body. He saw only a life in peril, a reflection of his own desperate fight for survival, but purer, more innocent. For a fleeting second, the image of Martha's kind face flashed before his eyes. She loved animals. Then it was gone, replaced by the sheer, animalistic terror in the puppy's cries. This was not a choice. It was an imperative. He reached the river's edge, the ground a treacherous sheet of ice and frozen mud, the water dark and seething, full of sharp, grinding ice flows, looked like death itself. He took a single ragged breath, the frigid air burning his lungs, and then he stepped in. The shock was a physical assault, stealing his breath, sending what felt like thousands of icy needles into his legs. The water was only up to his knees here, but the current was a vicious, unseen enemy, plucking at his clothes, trying to drag him down. He pushed forward, his gaze locked on the puppy. Each step was a torment. Chunks of ice slammed into his shins, scraping them raw. His already damaged hands plunged into water for balance, screamed with fresh, unbearable agony. He could feel the skin splitting further. From her vantage point, Genevieve watched, transfixed. Her initial apprehension had dissolved into stunned disbelief, then into a horrified, burgeoning respect. "Thomas, he's actually going in," she breathed, her voice trembling. "Madam, it's exceptionally dangerous," Thomas stated, his professional calm strained. "The current is far too strong. The water temperature, he can't last long in that." Genevieve barely heard him. Her world had narrowed to the struggling figure of the man in the river. She saw him stumble, nearly disappear beneath a wave, then fight his way back up with a guttural cry of effort. She saw the raw determination etched on his gaunt face, the unwavering focus in his eyes that seemed to burn through the distance, through the biting wind. This wasn't just a vagrant. This was a man displaying a kind of elemental courage she had only read about in books. The no trespassing sign felt like a brand on her conscience. Arthur fought his way onward, the water now swirling around his chest, the cold a crushing vice. His teeth chattered violently. His limbs were heavy, unresponsive. But the puppy's whimpers, weaker now, a thin thread of sound in the river's roar, were a lifeline, pulling him forward. He reached a jagged rock, his body a symphony of pain. He braced himself against its slick, icy surface, the sharp edges biting into his legs. The puppy, petrified, was huddled on the far side. "Easy now. Easy, little fellow." Arthur gasped, his voice raspy, barely audible. He extended a hand, slow and steady, ignoring the fire that shot up his arm as the frozen skin stretched. His fingers were blue, stiff, almost useless. I won't hurt you." His trembling fingertips brushed the puppy's sodden fur. It flinched then, as if sensing the desperate kindness in his touch. It leaned into his hand, letting out a soft, sorrowful whine. A fierce, protective warmth surged through Arthur, momentarily eclipsing the cold. He carefully, painstakingly, maneuvered his numb fingers under the puppy's tiny, shivering body. It was incredibly light. He gently drew it toward him, tucking it inside the front of his ragged coat, against his own freezing skin, hoping his body could offer some faint shield. The puppy burrowed in, a small, trembling weight of trust. The journey back to shore was a desperate, blurred agony. The current seemed determined to claim them both. He shielded the precious life in his coat with one arm, using the other to grope blindly for handholds on submerged rocks to fend off larger ice flows. His hands were beyond feeling now, just clumsy, bleeding tools. He could feel his strength draining, a deadly lassitude creeping into his mind. Just a little further, for this small one, on the riverbank, Genevieve Sterling was out her car, the sable throw fallen unheeded to the frozen ground. The icy wind whipped her hair across her face, but she didn't notice. Thomas stood a few paces behind, his expression grave. The raw, visceral empathy coursing through Genevieve was an alien, powerful sensation. Every faltering step Arthur took sent a shock wave of fear through her. When he finally staggered from the water and collapsed onto the muddy bank, a choked sob escaped her lips. He lay there, a broken, sodden heap. Then, with what seemed like his last ounce of strength, he fumbled with his coat. The puppy's small wet head emerged, and it began to lick Arthur's icy, bearded chin. "Thomas," Genevieve commanded, her voice shaking but clear and strong. "Get down there. Help him. Now." Thomas, startled by her tone, moved with an urgency Genevieve had never witnessed in him. He practically slid down the embankment. Genevieve followed, her expensive boots crunching on the frozen earth, heedless of the mud and ice. Arthur was barely conscious. The puppy was still nestled against him. "He's freezing, madam," Thomas said, his voice tight, as he knelt by Arthur. "His hands, they're in a terrible state." He gestured to the raw, bleeding flesh, the unnatural blue-white tinge of the skin. "Bring him to the car," Genevieve ordered, her usual aristocratic reserve shattered by an overwhelming sense of urgency. "And the puppy, be careful." Thomas hesitated for only a fraction of a second, the pristine interior of the Bentley flashing through his mind. "Madam, perhaps an ambulance?" "There's no time, Thomas. He needs warmth and medical attention now. My car, my responsibility." Her tone was absolute. They managed to get Arthur into the Bentley. Genevieve herself carefully scooped up the shivering puppy, wrapping it in her own discarded fur throw. The drive to the mansion was a flurry of calls. Dr. Henderson, her physician. "James, emergency at the estate. Severe hypothermia. Critical frostbite." Then Dr. Albright, the vet. "Sarah, a puppy, extreme exposure. Meet me at the house." She ignored Thomas's concerned glances. Her focus was on the unconscious man in her back seat, his breathing shallow. She gently brushed ice crystals from his matted hair. His hands, resting limply, were a horrific sight. This man, this stranger, had done this for an animal. They brought Arthur into a ground-floor guest suite. Staff, alerted by Genevieve, rushed in with blankets and hot water. Dr. Henderson arrived swiftly, his expression grave as he began his work, cutting away Arthur's frozen rags. Meanwhile, Genevieve took the puppy to the kitchen, where Dr. Albright was waiting. "He's a fighter," the vet murmured, toweling the little creature, just like the man who saved him. Genevieve returned to Arthur's room. He was unconscious and for his arm. Severe hypothermia, extensive frostbite on the hands. Dr. Henderson reported grimly. "He's lucky you got him here so quickly. A few more minutes." Genevieve sat quietly, watching Arthur. His face, though etched with hardship, looked almost peaceful in sleep. She noticed a thin leather thong around his neck. Gently, she drew out a small, tarnished silver locket. It was worn smooth with time, a keeper of lost memories. And in that moment, looking at the selfless, broken man, a powerful idea began to take root in Genevieve's mind, an idea born of awe and a sudden, aching desire for her own life to hold such profound meaning. This wasn't about charity. It was about recognizing an extraordinary human being. 2 days later, Arthur awoke to unfamiliar softness and warmth. He was in a grand room, sunlight streaming in. Pain throbbed dully in his heavily bandaged hands. "Easy there," a kind voice said. Genevieve Sterling sat nearby, a book unread in her lap, where Arthur rasped. "My home," she smiled. "You saved a life, mister?" Arthur Jenkins. His mind cleared. The puppy? Doing wonderfully, Genevieve assured him. Sleeping by the kitchen fire. We haven't named him. I hoped you might. Relief flooded him. My hands. Frostbite, she said gently. Severe, but the doctor is optimistic. You were incredibly brave, Arthur. I've never witnessed anything like it. Arthur flushed. Just a puppy. Couldn't leave him. A comfortable silence fell. Then Genevieve leaned forward. Arthur, what you did, it was inspiring. It's made me think. I have this large estate, and you stables. I want to start a small animal sanctuary, a place for creatures needing a second chance. Arthur looked at her, confused. A sanctuary needs a caretaker, Arthur, she said, her gaze steady. Someone with a good heart, courage, compassion. Someone like you. He stared. Me? But I'm homeless. I have nothing. You have character, Arthur. That's worth more than all my money, she said firmly. There's a cottage on the estate. It needs work, but it could be yours. A home, a wage, medical care, and you and the puppy would live there. 6 months on, the Sterling estate hummed with new life. The once derelict stables were now pristine, home to rescued horses. Renovated kennels housed happy dogs. And Arthur Jenkins, no longer gaunt but healthy, his eyes bright, move among them with quiet confidence. His companion, a thriving young dog named River, was always by his side. The small cottage was now Arthur's cozy home, flowers blooming in the window boxes. He worked with gentle dedication, his scarred hands now tools of healing and care. Genevieve often visited the sanctuary, walking with Arthur, discussing the animals. An unspoken friendship, built on respect and shared purpose, had blossomed between them. The no trespassing sign was long gone, replaced by one reading. The Blackwood River Sanctuary. Kindness welcome. In the evenings, Arthur would sit on his porch, River's head on his lap, a profound sense of peace settling over him. He was no longer a shadow, but a man with a home, a purpose, and a heart slowly mending. Genevieve, too, found a new richness in her life, a warmth that diamonds couldn't provide. The day his frostbitten hands had reached for a puppy, an unbelievable offer had indeed followed. But more than that, an act of pure, selfless courage had bridged an immense chasm, bringing healing, hope, and a reminder that the deepest connections are forged not by wealth or status, but by the simple, extraordinary power of human kindness.